The void cracked open above the endless grasslands, reality splitting like fragile glass beneath impossible pressure. Where the dimensional tear widened, something extraordinary plummeted through layers of existence that had never been meant to intersect. The sky itself seemed to recoil as a figure wrapped in orange and blue crashed into a world of perfect cubes and infinite possibility. Goku tumbled through the air, his spiky black hair whipping in the wind as he tried to make sense of what he was seeing. Everything looked wrong, yet strangely familiar. The trees were made of perfect squares stacked upon each other. The grass beneath him formed geometric patterns that his mind struggled to process. Even the clouds overhead moved in rigid, blocky formations across a sky that seemed painted rather than real. He hit the ground with tremendous force, sending dirt blocks flying in every direction. The impact created a crater 20 blocks wide, yet somehow the world absorbed his incredible strength without shattering completely. Goku pushed himself up from the cubic soil, brushing off strange, pixelated dust that clung to his GI. What is this place? The Saiyan warrior looked around with growing fascination rather than concern. In his travels across the universe, he had encountered countless strange worlds and dimensions, but nothing quite like this geometric realm where everything existed in perfect mathematical harmony. A soft hissing sound caught his attention. Goku turned to see a tall, dark figure with glowing green eyes watching him from behind a square tree. The creature moved with an unsettling stillness, its long limbs dangling as it observed the newcomer. When their eyes met, the being let out a piercing shriek and vanished in a puff of purple particles, teleporting away before Goku could react. Interesting. He had never seen anything quite like that teleportation technique. The energy signature was completely foreign, unlike Kai or any other power source he had encountered in his battles across the cosmos. This world operated on principles that defied everything he understood about combat and energy manipulation. As Goku began to explore, he noticed other creatures moving through the landscape. Strange green beings that seemed to be made of the same material as the world itself shambled across the plains. Their movements were erratic and purposeless, yet they showed no fear of his presence. When he approached one of these creatures, it simply stared at him with empty, dark sockets before continuing its endless wandering. The sun overhead caught his attention next. It was a perfect square, casting light in ways that seemed to ignore the normal laws of physics. Shadows fell at impossible angles, and the entire world seemed illuminated by some internal logic that had nothing to do with the natural order he knew. But what truly amazed Goku was the sensation of power that permeated everything around him. Not the familiar energy of living beings, but something else entirely. The very blocks beneath his feet hummed with potential. When he picked up a handful of dirt, it felt solid and real, yet somehow more fundamental than ordinary matter. These weren't just materials, they were building blocks of reality itself. He experimented with his strength, punching a nearby stone formation. Instead of crumbling into rubble as he expected, the rock broke apart into perfect cubes that scattered across the ground. Each piece maintained its geometric integrity as if the world refused to acknowledge destruction that didn't follow its mathematical rules. This is incredible. Goku's excitement grew as he realized the implications. In his own universe, power meant energy blasts and physical strength. Here, power seemed to mean something entirely different. The ability to manipulate and reshape reality itself, block by block, following patterns that were both alien and strangely intuitive. A new sound reached his ears, rhythmic and purposeful. Unlike the random shuffling of the green creatures, this had intention behind it. Goku followed the noise until he discovered its source. A humanoid figure wielding a strange tool, systematically breaking apart the landscape and collecting the resulting cubes. The being noticed his approach and stopped working, turning to face him with obvious curiosity rather than fear. It was roughly human in appearance, though its features had the same blocky quality as everything else in this realm. When it spoke, Its voice carried an accent Goku had never heard before, yet somehow he understood every word perfectly. "Greetings, stranger. I have not seen your kind before in these lands. From whence do you come, and what brings you to our world of endless possibility?" Goku scratched his head, trying to figure out how to explain his situation. "Hi there, my name is Goku. I was in the middle of training when this weird portal opened up and sucked me in. I guess I ended up here somehow." This place is amazing, though. Everything is made of these perfect shapes, and the way energy flows through everything is completely different from what I'm used to. The blocky figure nodded with understanding. "Aye, another traveler between realms. We have legends of such visitors, though few arrive with such spectacular entrances. I witnessed your descent from the mountain peaks where I was mining. The very foundations of our world trembled at your arrival." Goku's eyes lit up with curiosity. "You felt that? That's incredible. In most places, only other fighters would notice something like that. But here, it's like the whole world is connected somehow. I can sense energy patterns I've never encountered before." "Indeed," the figure replied, gesturing toward the landscape around them. "This realm operates on principles of creation and transformation. Every block contains infinite potential. Every structure can be reshaped according to will and imagination. We call it the craft of building, and it is both art and survival in equal measure." The Saiyan warrior found himself fascinated by this concept. Where he came from, power was about destruction and protection, about overwhelming force, meeting immovable defense. But here was a world where power meant creation, where strength was measured not in the ability to destroy, but in the capacity to build and reshape reality itself. "Can you teach me?" Goku asked with the enthusiasm of someone who had discovered an entirely new form of martial arts. "I've spent my whole life learning different fighting techniques, but this is something completely different. This is about creating instead of destroying." The figure smiled, or at least made the blocky approximation of a smile. Teaching is freely given to those who arrive with open hearts and curious minds. But know that mastery of these arts requires patience and understanding that may challenge one accustomed to more direct approaches to power. What followed was Goku's first lesson in the fundamental nature of this cubic universe. His teacher, who introduced himself as Constructor Prime, demonstrated the basic principles of block manipulation. Every material had different properties and purposes. Stone provided durability, but was difficult to work with. Wood offered flexibility and ease of use, but lacked the defensive capabilities needed for serious construction. Metals were rare and powerful, but required advanced techniques to shape properly. Goku watched with growing amazement as Constructor Prime demonstrated the creation of a simple shelter. With methodical precision, the Master Builder selected materials, arranged them in patterns that seemed to follow both aesthetic and functional principles, and gradually assembled a structure that was both beautiful and practical. The Saiyan's first attempts were, predictably, disasters. His tremendous physical strength, so perfectly controlled in combat, proved almost impossible to modulate for delicate construction work. Blocks shattered under his touch, carefully planned structures collapsed from excessive force, and his instinctive desire to move quickly resulted in chaotic, unstable creations. But Constructor Prime proved to be a patient teacher. Understanding that his students' difficulties came not from lack of ability, but from a fundamental difference in how he approached the application of power. Slowly, through repetition and careful guidance, Goku began to grasp the subtle relationship between force and creation in this strange new world. The breakthrough came when he stopped thinking of building as a completely separate skill from fighting. Instead, he began to approach construction with the same mindful precision he used in martial arts. Each block placement became like a carefully controlled strike. Each structural decision resembled the strategic thinking he applied in battle. The rhythm of building started to feel like the flow state he achieved during his most intense training sessions. As the cubic sun began to set in its mathematical arc across the sky, Goku stood back and admired his first successful creation. It was simple, just a small house with clean lines and proper proportions, but it represented something entirely new in his understanding of what power could accomplish. "This is incredible," he said, genuine wonder in his voice. "I've learned to channel my energy in so many different ways, but I never imagined using it to create something like this. It's like a completely different kind of strength." Constructor Prime nodded approvingly. "You learn quickly for one so accustomed to destruction. But remember, in this realm, creation and destruction are merely different faces of the same fundamental force. To build truly great works, you must also understand how to unmake what stands in your way." The implications of these words would not become clear until much later, when Goku encountered the darker aspects of this seemingly peaceful world. As night fell over the blocky landscape, Goku discovered that this geometric realm held dangers he had never anticipated. The peaceful creatures that wandered aimlessly during daylight hours transformed into something entirely different when darkness claimed the world. Their empty stares became filled with malevolent hunger, and their shambling movements gained deadly purpose. The first attack came without warning. What had been a harmless green figure during his earlier exploration now lunged at him with surprising speed, its blocky limbs reaching out with intent to harm. Goku dodged easily, his reflexes far too refined for such a clumsy assault, but the implications troubled him deeply. "Why do they change like this?" he asked Constructor Prime, who had invited him to share his mountain fortress for the evening. During the day, they seemed completely harmless. The Master Builder's expression grew. Summy Gazber azed out through a window made of perfectly transparent cubes. The cycle of light and darkness brings transformation to all things in this realm. What appears benign under the sun's influence becomes twisted by shadow's touch. It is one of the fundamental laws that govern our existence here. Goku watched through the crystal-clear barrier as more creatures emerged from hidden places throughout the landscape. Skeletal warriors assembled themselves from scattered bones, their empty eye sockets glowing with eerie light. Massive spiders the size of houses skittered across the terrain on legs that moved with mechanical precision. Most disturbing of all were the explosive green beings that moved with deliberate intent toward any structure that showed signs of habitation. "These monsters are completely different from anything in my world," Goku observed, studying their movement patterns with a warrior's analytical eye. "They don't seem to have ki or any energy signature I can detect, but they're definitely alive somehow." Constructor Prime nodded gravely. "They represent the realm's attempt to maintain balance. Where there is creation, there must also be forces of entropy and destruction. The monsters serve as a constant reminder that nothing built can be taken for granted. Every structure must be defended. Every creation must be maintained against the forces that would see it reduced to nothing." This concept fascinated Goku on multiple levels. In his experience, enemies were individuals with their own motivations, goals, and reasons for conflict. But these creatures seemed to represent something more fundamental, like living embodiments of natural forces rather than thinking beings with personal agendas. The first real test of his understanding came when one of the explosive creatures approached their fortress. Goku prepared to intercept it with his usual direct approach, but Constructor Prime stopped him with a raised hand. "Wait," the Master Builder commanded. "Observe first. Understanding your enemy's nature is more important than simply overpowering them." The green creature moved with single-minded determination toward the base of their mountain stronghold. When it reached the walls, it began to pulse with increasing intensity, its entire body glowing brighter and brighter until the inevitable explosion rocked the entire structure. The blast was unlike anything Goku had experienced. Instead of the chaotic destruction he expected, the explosion followed precise geometric patterns, removing blocks in perfect spherical formations. The damage was extensive but mathematically predictable, as if the creature's destructive force operated according to the same fundamental rules that govern construction in this realm. Incredible, Goku breathed, watching as Constructor Prime immediately began repairing the damage with practiced efficiency. Even their destruction follows the world's logic. It's like everything here is part of one massive system. Precisely, Constructor Prime replied, while placing replacement blocks with methodical precision. And understanding that system is the key to true mastery. Raw power alone cannot solve every problem in this realm. Sometimes the most effective approach requires patience, planning, and respect for the underlying principles that govern all things here. This lesson proved prophetic when Goku encountered his first truly dangerous opponent in the cubic world. 3 days into his stay, while exploring a vast underground cavern system that Constructor Prime had warned him about, he came face to face with something that defied all his expectations. The creature that emerged from the depths of the cave was unlike the surface monsters in every conceivable way. Where they were simple and predictable, this being radiated intelligence and malevolent purpose. Its form constantly shifted and changed. Made up of what Shadow Given appeared to be living geometric substance. When it spoke, its voice resonated through the stone walls with harmonics that made Goku's teeth ache. "Another outsider comes to our sacred depths," the entity hissed, its words carrying undertones of ancient anger. "You bring the stench of foreign power into places where such things should not exist." Goku assumed his fighting stance, immediately recognizing the threat level this opponent represented. Unlike the mindless monsters above, this creature possessed both intelligence and genuine malice. "Hey there," he called out, trying his usual approach of attempting communication before resorting to violence. "I'm not looking for trouble. I'm just trying to understand this place better." The shadow being's form rippled with what might have been laughter. Understanding? You seek to comprehend forces that existed before your reality was even conceived. This realm belongs to those who have mastered its deepest mysteries, not to wandering fools who stumble through dimensional barriers. The attack that followed demonstrated capabilities that shocked even Goku's extensive combat experience. The creature didn't rely on physical strikes or energy blasts. Instead, it manipulated the very environment around them, turning the cave walls into weapons, reshaping the ground beneath Goku's feet, and creating traps from the fundamental building blocks of reality itself. Goku found himself in the unprecedented situation of fighting an opponent who could rewrite the rules of engagement in real time. Every technique he attempted was countered not by superior skill or power, but by environmental manipulation that made conventional combat approaches ineffective. When he launched himself forward with his incredible speed, the floor beneath him transformed into quicksand made of shifting sand blocks. When he prepared an energy attack, the air itself seemed to thicken, dispersing his Kai in directions that followed no logical pattern. Most frustrating of all, when he tried to grapple with his opponent directly, the shadow being simply dissolved into component blocks and reformed elsewhere in the chamber. "You fight like all outsiders," the entity taunted while reshaping stalactites into spears that rained down from above. "You expect this realm to bend to your foreign concepts of power and conflict. But here, true strength comes from harmony with the fundamental forces that created everything you see around you." The words struck Goku with sudden clarity. He had been approaching this fight exactly as he would any other, trying to impose his own understanding of combat onto a situation that required completely different thinking. This wasn't about overpowering an opponent through superior strength or technique. This was about understanding and working with the unique properties of this geometric universe. Instead of fighting against the environmental changes, Goku began to work with them. When the ground shifted beneath him, he used the new terrain to his advantage. When the air thickened around his energy attacks, he modified the ki flow to match the altered medium. Most importantly, he stopped thinking of the blocks and structures around him as obstacles and began treating them as tools. The Shadow Being's confidence wavered as its opponent adapted to the cubic realm's combat principles with impossible speed. What had been a one-sided demonstration of environmental mastery became a genuine contest between two forces that understood the world's fundamental nature from completely different perspectives. Goku's breakthrough came when he realized that his martial arts training had actually prepared him perfectly for this type of combat. The same principles that governed the flow of Kai through his body could be applied to the flow of creative and destructive forces through the geometric environment. Every block placement became like a perfectly timed strike, led the every structural modification resemble precise energy control he used in his most advanced techniques. The battle that followed transformed the entire cavern system, where once there had been simple stone passages, now there existed a complex maze of chambers, bridges, and defensive structures that both combatants created and destroyed in their ongoing contest. The very landscape became their battlefield, reshaped moment by moment according to the demands of their conflict. But even as Goku began to match his opponent's environmental manipulation abilities, he sensed that this was only the beginning of what this world had to teach him about the true nature of power and creation. The Shadow Being's form began to pulse with increasing intensity, its geometric substance taking on patterns that hurt to look at directly. Goku felt something shift in the air around them. A fundamental change that went beyond the simple environmental manipulation they had been using. This was different. This was the creature tapping into something far more dangerous. "You have shown unexpected adaptability, outsider," the entity acknowledged, its voice now carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate through multiple dimensions simultaneously. "But adaptation alone will not save you from what comes next. You have forced me to reveal powers that have remained hidden since the first blocks were placed in this realm." The cavern around them began to change in ways that defied even the flexible laws Goku had started to understand. Blocks didn't just move or reshape themselves. They began to phase in and out of existence entirely, creating spaces that existed in multiple states simultaneously. Gravity shifted in localized pockets, creating areas where up and down became meaningless concepts. Goku found himself struggling to maintain his footing as the very nature of three-dimensional space became fluid around him. This wasn't just environmental control anymore. This creature was manipulating the fundamental code that governed how reality functioned in this cubic universe. "Incredible," he breathed, dodging a section of wall that existed in a state of quantum superposition, simultaneously solid and intangible until the moment of contact would force it to choose. "You're not just using the world's power, you're rewriting its basic rules." The Shadow Being's form expanded, becoming less distinct as it merged with the chaotic environment it was creating. "Precisely. I am one of the original architects. Beings who helped establish the mathematical principles that allow this realm to exist. While surface dwellers like your teacher play with simple construction and destruction, we work with the source code itself." This revelation sent chills through Goku's spine. He had encountered cosmic-level threats before, beings who could destroy planets or reshape reality on massive scales. But this was something entirely different. This creature wasn't just powerful within the existing framework of universal laws. It was one of the entities responsible for creating those laws in the first place. The attacks that followed pushed Goku to his absolute limits. Sections of space folded in on themselves, creating impossible geometries that his three-dimensional thinking couldn't properly process. Time flowed at different rates in different parts of the chamber, forcing him to adjust his movements constantly to avoid being caught in temporal distortions. Most challenging of all were the moments when the creature temporarily deleted fundamental constants from localized areas of reality. Goku would find himself in pockets where conservation of energy didn't apply, where cause and effect operated in reverse, or where the speed of light became a variable rather than a constant. But even as he struggled against these reality-warping attacks, Goku began to notice patterns. The Shadow Being's manipulations weren't random or arbitrary. They followed logical structures, mathematical progressions, that his martial artist's mind could begin to recognize and predict. Every technique I've ever learned has been based on understanding patterns, he realized, narrowly avoiding a space fold that would have compressed him into a two-dimensional existence. Energy flow, timing, distance, leverage, all of it follows rules, even when those rules are different from what I'm used to. With this insight, Goku began to fight back, not by opposing the reality distortions, but by learning their mathematical language. When space folded around him, he folded his own movement patterns to match. When time dilated, he adjusted his perception to flow with the temporal changes rather than fighting against them. The Shadow Being's confidence began to waver as its opponent demonstrated an unprecedented ability to adapt to fundamental alterations in the nature of reality itself. Impossible, it hissed, its form becoming more agitated as its most powerful attacks were systematically countered. No outsider should be able to comprehend the deep mathematics that govern existence itself. Goku smiled, feeling a familiar excitement building within him. This was what he lived for. Not the easy victories or the overwhelming displays of brute force, but the moments when he encountered something genuinely new and challenging that pushed him to grow beyond his previous limitations. "Maybe I can't understand it the way you do," he admitted, weaving through a series of attacks that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously. "But I don't need to understand it completely to work with it. I just need to feel its rhythm and flow with it instead of fighting against it." What followed was unlike any battle Goku had ever experienced. Instead of the usual exchange of devastating attacks and defensive maneuvers, this became a contest of adaptation and mathematical intuition. Each combatant pushed the boundaries of what was possible within the cubic realm's flexible reality, creating and discarding new physical laws moment by moment. The cavern system expanded into impossible configurations as their conflict reshaped not just the physical space, but the conceptual framework that defined how space could exist. Chambers appeared that were bigger on the inside than the outside. Corridors stretched for infinite distances while somehow connecting to themselves in closed loops. Vertical passages led downward into upward directions. Other entities began to take notice of the disturbance. From deeper parts of the underground network, more shadow beings emerged, their forms radiating the same ancient power as Goku's opponent. But instead of joining the battle, they observed with what seemed like professional interest, as if watching a particularly complex mathematical proof being worked out in real time. "The original architect grows desperate," one of them noted, its voice carrying across dimensions without regard for the normal limitations of sound transmission. It resorts to increasingly unstable modifications to reality's base parameters. Another observer added its analysis. "The outsider shows remarkable intuitive grasp of our deepest principles. Perhaps this encounter will prove more educational than destructive." Goku caught fragments of their conversation, while continuing to dodge attacks that rewrote the laws of physics around him. These beings weren't just monsters or opponents to be defeated. They were researchers, scientists of a sort, studying the fundamental nature of existence itself. His battle with their colleague had become an experiment in applied mathematics and theoretical physics. The realization changed his entire approach to the conflict. Instead of seeking victory through superior combat ability, he began to view the encounter as a learning opportunity. Every reality distortion became a lesson in how this universe's deepest principles functioned. Every impossible attack taught him something new about the relationship between consciousness and the mathematical structures that defined existence. His opponent sensed the shift immediately. "You no longer fight to win," it observed, its attacks becoming more exploratory and less overtly hostile. "You fight to understand." This is unexpected behavior from a being of your apparent nature. Goku nodded, finding a moment of stability in a pocket of normalized space-time. "Fighting to win is what I usually do, but this place has taught me that there are other kinds of strength, other ways to approach challenges that don't involve overwhelming force or superior technique. The shadow being's form began to stabilize, its chaotic energy patterns settling into more organized configurations. You speak of lessons learned, yet you arrived here through accident rather than design. How does one stumble into wisdom without seeking it? That's a good question, Goku replied, genuinely considering the philosophical implications. I guess I've always learned best by doing rather than thinking. When I encounter something new, my first instinct is to jump in and experience it directly, rather than trying to understand it from a distance. The other original architects moved closer, their attention now fully focused on this unexpected conversation. Their forms radiated curiosity rather than hostility, as if Goku had transformed from a potential threat into a fascinating research subject. Most beings who stumble into our realm either flee immediately or attempt to impose their own reality's laws upon ours, one of them explained. Few show the flexibility to adapt their fundamental approaches to existence itself. Another added, your combat methodology suggests exposure to multiple universal frameworks. The techniques you employ draw from mathematical principles that extend beyond any single reality's constraints. Goku found himself in the unprecedented situation of being analyzed by beings whose understanding of existence operated on levels he could barely comprehend. Yet somehow their observations didn't feel condescending or dismissive. Instead, they seemed genuinely interested in his perspective as someone who approached cosmic principles from an entirely different angle. The original shadow being's hostility had completely evaporated, replaced by what appeared to be professional fascination. Your learning curve defies all our models for dimensional integration, it admitted. Most outsiders require centuries to achieve even basic harmony with our reality's mathematical substrate. You accomplished functional adaptation in minutes. I've had a lot of practice adapting to new situations, Goku explained, settling into a more relaxed posture as the immediate danger passed. My whole life has been about encountering new opponents, new techniques, new ways of understanding power and strength. This place is definitely the most challenging I've ever experienced, but the basic principle is the same. The gathering of original architects exchanged communications through methods that bypassed conventional speech entirely. Goku could sense the flow of information between them, complex data streams that conveyed meaning through mathematical relationships, rather than words or images. We have reached a consensus, their apparent leader announced. Your presence here represents an opportunity for mutual advancement. We propose an exchange of knowledge that could benefit both your understanding and our research into cross-dimensional consciousness integration. Goku's excitement at this prospect was immediately obvious. You want to teach me more about how this place works? That sounds incredible. I've learned so much already. But I can tell there are depths here that I haven't even begun to explore. The offer comes with conditions, another architect interjected. The knowledge we possess regarding reality manipulation carries significant responsibility. It cannot be shared with beings who might use such understanding for destructive purposes across multiple dimensional frameworks. That makes sense, Goku agreed readily. I've always tried to use my strength to protect people rather than hurt them. If you can teach me new ways to help others, I'd be honored to learn from you. What followed was unlike any training Goku had ever undergone. Instead of physical exercises or energy manipulation techniques, the original architects introduced him to the conceptual frameworks that governed existence across multiple dimensional planes. They showed him how consciousness could interface directly with mathematical reality, how intention could reshape fundamental constants, and how understanding could transcend the normal limitations of physical law. The lessons took place in specially constructed spaces that existed partially outside normal reality, allowing for experimentation with cosmic principles without risking damage to the stable portions of the cubic universe. Here, Goku learned to perceive existence as a vast, interconnected system of mathematical relationships, rather than a collection of separate objects and forces. But even as his understanding of cosmic principles expanded exponentially, he never lost sight of the simple truths that had guided him throughout his life, powered to protect others. Strength meant taking responsibility for those who couldn't defend themselves, and the greatest victories were the ones that created rather than destroyed. These core beliefs, far from being obstacles to his advanced education, proved to be the foundation that allowed him to safely integrate knowledge that had driven lesser beings to madness or corruption. The original architects observed his progress with growing amazement, documenting his unique approach to cosmic consciousness for their vast libraries of dimensional research. Your methodology suggests possibilities we had not previously considered, they admitted during one particularly intensive lesson on reality architecture. Most beings who achieve this level of understanding do so through millennia of careful study and gradual expansion of consciousness. Your approach, while unconventional, appears to offer certain advantages we should investigate further. As his education progressed, Goku began to understand that his arrival in the cubic universe had been far from accidental. The dimensional barriers between realities weren't random walls separating unrelated spaces. They were carefully maintained structures that prevented unstable interactions between incompatible universal frameworks. For someone to cross between dimensions without specialized knowledge or equipment suggested that deeper forces were at work, currents in the cosmic flow that operated according to principles even the original architects didn't fully comprehend. His presence here might be part of some larger pattern that extended beyond any single reality's boundaries. But understanding the cosmic significance of his situation didn't diminish Goku's appreciation for the immediate wonders of this geometric world. Every lesson revealed new possibilities for creation and positive change. Every technique he mastered opened up new ways to help others and protect the things that mattered most. The cubic universe had become more than just another strange place he'd stumbled into during his adventures. It was becoming a second home, a realm where his deepest values aligned perfectly with the fundamental principles that governed existence itself. Here, more than anywhere else, he could truly embody the ideal of strength used in service of others. The knowledge that flowed through Goku's consciousness during these advanced lessons defied everything he thought he understood about the nature of power itself. Where his previous training had focused on channeling energy through physical forms, these teachings revealed how consciousness could directly interface with the mathematical substrate underlying all existence. Each new concept expanded his awareness exponentially, yet somehow felt perfectly natural, as if he were remembering forgotten truths, rather than learning entirely new information. The original architects constructed increasingly complex training scenarios, pocket dimensions where the fundamental laws of physics became malleable toys in the hands of those who understood their true nature. In these spaces, Goku learned to perceive matter not as solid objects, but as stable patterns of information. Energy, not as flowing force, but as conscious intention given mathematical form. His first successful reality manipulation came during a lesson on dimensional folding. The task seemed impossible, bending space itself so that two distant points could occupy the same location without paradox or collapse. Traditional thinking would have declared such a thing absurd, a violation of basic geometric principles that governed three-dimensional existence. But the cubic universe operated on expanded mathematical frameworks, where impossibility was merely a limitation of perspective. Goku discovered that by shifting his consciousness to perceive space as a flexible medium rather than a rigid container, he could guide its transformation through pure intention, focused into precise mathematical relationships. The moment of breakthrough felt like every significant advance in his martial arts training compressed into a single instant of crystalline understanding. Space folded around his awareness, 2 points separated by vast distance suddenly sharing the same coordinates without losing their individual identity or creating paradoxical overlap. Remarkable, observed the lead architect, its form pulsing with patterns that indicated genuine surprise. Most students require extensive preparation before attempting such fundamental alterations to spatial geometry. You achieved stable dimensional folding through intuitive understanding rather than calculated precision. Goku flexed his fingers, watching reality bend and straighten around his movements like fabric responding to gentle pressure. The sensation was intoxicating, not because of the power it represented, but because of the elegant simplicity underlying such seemingly complex phenomena. Everything in this universe followed logical patterns, mathematical relationships, that his consciousness could learn to dance with rather than struggle against. The implications of these abilities extended far beyond mere academic exercise. As his understanding deepened, Goku began to envision applications that could transform his approach to protecting others across multiple dimensional frameworks. Instead of relying solely on overwhelming force to defeat threats, he could potentially reshape the very contexts in which conflicts occurred. Environmental hazards could be neutralized through localized alterations to physical laws. Enemies separated from civilian populations through selective dimensional barriers. Most intriguingly, the principles he was learning might allow him to extend protective fields across vast distances, creating safe zones where harmful forces simply couldn't exist, according to locally modified reality parameters. But with expanded capabilities came proportionally expanded responsibilities. The original architects made clear that knowledge of reality manipulation carried obligations that transcended any single universe or dimensional framework. Those who could reshape existence itself became custodians of the mathematical structures that allowed countless realities to maintain stable existence. Power without wisdom leads to catastrophic cascade failures across multiple dimensional planes. They explained during a particularly sobering lesson. Your consciousness has demonstrated remarkable stability during integration of advanced concepts, but we must ensure that emotional responses do not compromise your ability to make rational decisions under extreme stress. The test they devised pushed Goku to psychological limits he hadn't known existed. Using their reality manipulation abilities, the architects created scenarios where he possessed the power to solve massive problems through simple applications of the techniques he'd learned. Entire civilizations facing extinction that could be saved with minor alterations to universal constants. Cosmic threats that could be neutralized through strategic dimensional barriers. But each solution carried consequences that rippled outward through interconnected systems of existence. Saving one civilization might doom 3 others. Neutralizing one threat might create vulnerabilities that allowed worse dangers to emerge. The mathematical perfection of his new abilities meant that every action produced precisely calculated results, eliminating the comfortable uncertainty that had previously allowed him to act on instinct and hope for the best. The emotional weight of such responsibility threatened to paralyze his decision-making entirely. How could he choose which lives to prioritize when his actions would determine the fate of beings across multiple realities? How could he trust his judgment when the stakes extended beyond anything he had previously comprehended? The breakthrough came when he realized that his core principles remained valid even at cosmic scales. Protection of life, defense of the innocent, and the willing acceptance of personal sacrifice in service of others provided stable foundations for decision-making, regardless of the complexity of the situations involved. True wisdom lies not in perfect knowledge of all possible outcomes, he told the assembled architects after successfully navigating their psychological examination. It lies in maintaining consistent values while adapting methods to meet changing circumstances. I may not be able to save everyone, but I can always choose to act in ways that honor the fundamental worth of all conscious existence. Their response indicated approval, mixed with continued amazement at his unconventional approach to cosmic responsibility. Most beings who achieve this level of capability either become paralyzed by the weight of infinite possibility or corrupted by the temptation to impose their will upon existence itself. Your methodology suggests a third path we had not previously documented. As his education neared completion, the original architects revealed the true purpose behind their intensive instruction. The dimensional barriers that normally prevented uncontrolled travel between realities had been weakening across multiple sectors of the cosmic framework. Entities that should remain confined to their native universes were beginning to slip through into realms where their presence could cause catastrophic instability. Goku's accidental arrival had been one symptom of this growing problem, but far from the most dangerous. Other travelers between dimensions possessed intentions far less benign than his own desire to explore and help others. Some sought to conquer new realities, imposing their native universe's laws upon incompatible systems. Others carried infectious concepts that could unravel the mathematical foundations of entire dimensional planes. The situation requires intervention from beings who understand both the technical aspects of dimensional stability and the broader implications of cross-reality interaction, the lead architect explained. Your unique combination of combat capability, moral foundation, and newly acquired knowledge of reality manipulation makes you ideally suited for this role. You want me to become some kind of dimensional guardian? Goku asked, immediately understanding the implications. Traveling between realities to fix problems and stop threats that normal defenses can't handle? The role would encompass such responsibilities, though the scope extends beyond simple conflict resolution. You would serve as an agent of stability, helping to maintain the barriers that allow countless realities to coexist without destructive interference. The prospect excited Goku on multiple levels. Not only would he be able to continue exploring new worlds and encountering fresh challenges, but he would be doing so in service of protecting countless beings across the entire spectrum of existence. It represented the ultimate evolution of his lifelong commitment to using strength in defense of others. But accepting to mean such a role would leaving behind everything familiar, potentially forever. His friends, his family, the Earth that had shaped him into the person he had become. The cubic universe had already taught him that home could be found in unexpected places, but the thought of permanent separation from those he cared about most created a profound emotional conflict. The decision need not be immediate, the architects assured him, somehow sensing his internal struggle. The dimensional barriers will require significant time to deteriorate to truly dangerous levels. You may return to your native reality to arrange your affairs and bid farewell to those who matter to you. But eventually, a choice must be made between personal attachments and cosmic responsibility. Goku nodded slowly, understanding that he was being offered something unprecedented in his experience. Not just power or knowledge, but purpose on a scale that encompassed the fundamental structure of existence itself. The boy who had once dreamed of becoming strong enough to protect his village was being asked to become strong enough to protect the very concept of reality across infinite dimensions. The preparation for his temporary return to Earth began immediately. The original architects constructed a specialized dimensional gateway that would allow him to travel back to his native universe while maintaining the modifications to his consciousness that enabled reality manipulation. The process required careful calibration to ensure that his expanded abilities wouldn't cause unintended disruptions in a reality governed by more conventional physical laws. As the portal took shape, following geometric patterns that hurt to perceive directly, Goku felt a mixture of anticipation and melancholy. The cubic universe had become far more than just another strange world he'd stumbled into during his adventures. It had become a place where he'd discovered new depths to his own potential, new meanings for concepts like strength and protection that had guided him throughout his existence. The friends he'd made among the architects and surface dwellers like Constructor Prime had shown him that connection and understanding could transcend the barriers of form and origin. Intelligence could wear many faces, wisdom could emerge from unexpected sources, and the fundamental drive to create and protect existed across all realities, regardless of their specific mathematical frameworks. But Earth called to him with bonds forged through decades of shared experience and mutual sacrifice. Chi-Chi and Gohan deserved to understand what had happened to him and where his path might lead. Vegeta would want to know about the new levels of power and understanding he'd discovered. Piccolo would appreciate the philosophical implications of reality manipulation as a tool for protection rather than destruction. Most importantly, he needed to determine whether accepting the role of Dimensional Guardian would truly serve his deepest values or simply represent a more sophisticated form of the same mistakes that had sometimes led him to prioritize exciting challenges over the people he claimed to protect. The portal stabilized into a perfect circle of organized chaos, showing glimpses of familiar blue skies and white clouds beyond its shimmering surface. Through that gateway lay everything he'd known before his accidental journey to this geometric realm. Family, friends, a lifetime of memories and relationships that had shaped him into the person capable of learning what the original architects had taught him. Your return pathway will remain stable for precisely 72 hours of your reality's temporal flow, the lead architect informed him. After that point, the energy requirements for maintaining cross-dimensional stability will necessitate gateway closure. Proposal: should you choose to accept our new portal, will be constructed at that time for your return to cosmic duties. 3 days to decide the course of the rest of his existence. 3 days to determine whether his greatest service lay in continued protection of the single world that had given him purpose, or in accepting responsibility for the mathematical structures that allowed all worlds to exist in stable separation. Goku stepped toward the portal, then paused at its threshold. The cubic universe stretched out behind him, geometric landscapes filled with beings who had welcomed him, taught him, and shown him possibilities he'd never imagined. Ahead lay the familiar Earth that had been home for most of his life, populated by people who'd shared his struggles and victories through countless adventures. Both worlds represented aspects of who he was and who he might become. The choice between them would define not just his own future, but potentially the fate of countless realities, dependent on the stability of dimensional barriers he was uniquely qualified to maintain. With characteristic directness, Goku stepped through the portal toward whatever destiny awaited on the other side, carrying within his consciousness the geometric patterns and mathematical truths that had transformed his understanding of existence itself. The cubic universe watched his departure through countless angular eyes, its original architects already calculating the probability matrices that would determine whether their unprecedented gamble in interdimensional education would ultimately serve the cause of cosmic stability, or create new variables too complex for even their advanced mathematics to predict. The dimensional gateway collapsed behind him with a sound like reality sighing, leaving only empty space where infinite possibility had briefly touched the ordered world of perfect cubes and mathematical certainty. The familiar sensation of Earth's gravity welcomed Goku as he tumbled through blue skies that seemed almost impossibly organic after months surrounded by geometric perfection. His feet touched down in a grassy field outside West City, and immediately he noticed how different everything felt. The ground beneath him was soft and irregular, composed of countless individual blades of grass that swayed in patterns too complex for mathematical prediction. The air carried scents and sounds that followed no orderly arrangement, a chaotic symphony of life that his consciousness had nearly forgotten during his time in the cubic realm. Everything seemed smaller somehow, more fragile. The trees grew in twisted, imperfect shapes that would have been impossible to construct using the systematic principles he'd learned from the original architects. Even the clouds overhead moved in fluid, unpredictable formations that defied the orderly geometric patterns that had become second nature to his perception. Yet despite these differences, or perhaps because of them, Earth felt overwhelmingly like home. This was the world that had shaped his understanding of heroism, friendship, and sacrifice. These were the chaotic, beautiful imperfections that had taught him to value life in all its messy, unpredictable glory. The first person to notice his return was a farmer working in nearby fields who dropped his tools and stared in amazement at the figure that had literally fallen from the sky. Goku waved cheerfully, momentarily forgetting that his casual manipulation of dimensional space might seem unusual to beings who operated within conventional physical limitations. "Sorry about that," he called out with his characteristic grin. "Just dropping by to visit some friends. Don't mind me." The farmer's expression shifted from shock to recognition, as news reports and legends had made Goku's face familiar to most of Earth's population. The defender of the planet, the man who had saved the world countless times, had returned from whatever cosmic adventure had claimed his attention this time. Word of his arrival spread with the efficiency that only small communities could achieve. Within hours, the first of his friends began to appear. Krillin arrived by air, his face showing relief mixed with curiosity about his friend's extended absence. Behind him came Master Roshi, moving with the dignified urgency of someone who had witnessed too many of Goku's disappearances to take his returns for granted. "Goku, where have you been?" Krillin demanded, landing beside his oldest friend with practiced ease. Chi-Chi has been worried sick, and Gohan keeps asking when his father is coming home. Even Vegeta has been acting stranger than usual, muttering about sensing your energy signature in impossible places. The question struck deeper than Krillin could have known. How could Goku explain the cubic universe in terms that beings bound by conventional reality could understand? How could he describe mathematical frameworks that allowed consciousness to interface directly with the structural foundations of existence itself? "It's D," he began complicate, then realized immediately how inadequate those words were. "I found myself in another dimension, a place where everything works completely differently from here. The people there taught me things about the nature of reality that I never imagined were possible." Master Roshi stroked his beard thoughtfully, his ancient eyes showing the wisdom that came from decades of witnessing the impossible become routine around his former student. "Another dimension, you say? And what manner of beings inhabit such a place?" "They're called the original architects," Goku explained, struggling to find words that could convey the majesty and alien intelligence of those geometric entities. "They helped create the mathematical laws that allow different realities to exist without interfering with each other. They taught me how consciousness reshape can the fundamental structures that define existence itself." Even as he spoke, Goku could see the confusion in his friend's eyes. These concepts, which had become natural to him through intensive education and direct experience, remained abstract impossibilities to beings who had never encountered the flexible reality frameworks of the cubic universe. The arrival of Piccolo provided a welcome interruption to his awkward attempts at explanation. The Namekian's approach carried the measured dignity that characterized all his movements. But his expression showed concern that went beyond mere curiosity about Goku's whereabouts. "Your energy feels different," Piccolo observed without preamble, his enhanced senses detecting the subtle changes that intensive reality manipulation training had wrought upon Goku's consciousness. "There are patterns within your ki that follow no earthly logic. What exactly did these beings teach you?" Rather than attempting further verbal explanations, Goku decided on a demonstration. He focused his awareness on the immediate environment, perceiving the familiar landscape through the expanded consciousness frameworks the architects had helped him develop. The grass, the trees, the very air around them revealed themselves as intricate patterns of organized energy rather than separate physical objects. With careful precision, he reached out with his modified consciousness and gently encouraged a small section of Earth to reshape itself. Nothing dramatic or alarming, just a subtle rearrangement that caused wildflowers to bloom in a perfect spiral pattern around their gathering. The effect on his audience was immediate and profound. Krillin stepped backward instinctively, his combat-trained reflexes responding to the display of power that operated on principles completely outside his experience. Master Roshi's eyes widened with the recognition of someone who had spent a lifetime studying the mysteries of ki manipulation, yet had never encountered anything remotely similar. But it was Piccolo's reaction that concerned Goku most. The Namekian's expression showed not amazement or curiosity, but something approaching fear. His connection to the planet itself, the deep bonds that linked him to Earth's life force, had detected something that the others missed. That wasn't ki manipulation, Piccolo said slowly, his voice carrying undertones of deep unease. You didn't channel energy to create that effect. You changed the fundamental nature of the matter itself, convinced it to behave according to different principles than the ones that normally govern this reality. The observation was more accurate than Goku had expected. His demonstration had indeed involved localized modifications to the mathematical constants that defined how organic matter could organize itself. From his perspective, it had been a gentle, harmless adjustment, barely worthy of notice compared to the reality-shaping techniques he'd learned from the architects. But seen from the perspective of beings whose entire existence depended upon the stability of those same mathematical constants, his casual manipulation of fundamental principles represented a potential threat of unprecedented magnitude. Is that dangerous? Krillin asked, voicing the question that everyone present was thinking. I mean, if you can change the basic rules that make things work, what happens if you make a mistake? The question struck at the heart of the dilemma that had haunted Goku throughout his advanced education. Every technique he'd learned carried the potential for catastrophic consequences if applied incorrectly. Even minor adjustments to reality's underlying frameworks could cascade into instabilities that affected entire dimensional regions. The original architect spent centuries teaching me how to recognize and avoid dangerous applications, he assured his friends, though he could see that his words provided limited comfort. They have safeguards built into their training methods, ways of ensuring that the knowledge can't be misused accidentally or intentionally. But the deeper truth, which he couldn't bring himself to voice, was that his education remained incomplete. The architects had taught him the theoretical foundations and basic applications of reality manipulation, but true mastery would require decades of careful practice under controlled conditions. His current abilities, impressive as they might seem, represented barely the beginning of what was possible for consciousness that had learned to interface directly with mathematical reality. The sound of approaching aircraft interrupted his troubled reflections. A familiar capsule ship descended from the sky with the controlled aggression that characterized all of Vegeta's movements. The Saiyan Prince emerged from his vehicle with barely contained energy, his expression showing the mixture of anticipation and irritation that typically accompanied his encounters with Goku. "Kakarot," Vegeta declared without preamble, "your energy signature has been fluctuating in patterns that make no sense according to any Saiyan combat principles I know. What new transformation have you achieved while avoiding your training obligations?" The assumption that his changes represented some new level of Super Saiyan development was understandable but completely inaccurate. What Goku had learned transcended the biological modifications that characterized their traditional power increases. This was consciousness expansion that operated on principles entirely separate from the genetic advantages of their alien heritage. "It's not a transformation, Vegeta," he tried to explain, knowing that the prince's competitive nature would make acceptance of this truth particularly difficult. "It's more like learning a completely different language, one that allows direct communication with the mathematical structures that define how reality works." Vegeta's expression shifted through several stages of disbelief, before settling on barely contained fury. "You expect me to believe that while I've been maintaining my training discipline, you've been playing with mathematical abstractions instead of pursuing genuine power increases?" Before Goku could respond, the ground beneath their feet began to vibrate with a frequency that had nothing to do with conventional seismic activity. The sensation was subtle but unmistakable to anyone who had learned to perceive reality through expanded consciousness frameworks. Something was interfering with the dimensional barriers that separated Earth from other realities. The disturbance grew stronger, accompanied by visual distortions that made the air around them shimmer like heat waves rising from sun-baked pavement. But these weren't thermal effects. They were signs that the mathematical constants governing three-dimensional space were being subjected to external pressure from forces operating in higher dimensional frameworks. Goku's training with the original architects allowed him to recognize the symptoms immediately. Some entity with reality manipulation capabilities was attempting to breach the barriers between dimensions, using techniques that showed little regard for the stability of the receiving universe's foundational principles. "Everyone needs to step back," he warned, his voice carrying new authority that came from understanding the true scope of the danger they faced. "Something is trying to force its way into our reality from outside, and the process could destabilize the entire local region if it's not handled properly." His friends responded to the urgency in his tone, but their movements were hampered by confusion about what exactly they should be preparing to face. Their combat experience had taught them to respond to enemies that followed conventional physical laws, threats that could be understood and countered through applications of speed, strength, and energy projection. But dimensional incursions operated according to entirely different principles. The greatest danger came not from the invading entity itself, but from the cascading instabilities that could result from improper interaction between incompatible reality frameworks. A single mistake in handling such a situation could unravel the mathematical structures that allowed Earth's universe to maintain coherent existence. The distortions intensified, reality bending and twisting as something vast and alien pressed against the barriers that normally prevented cross-dimensional travel. Through the growing rift, Goku caught glimpses of another universe, one where the laws of physics followed patterns that would be lethal to beings evolved under Earth's more stable conditions. But more concerning than the alien environment visible through the breach was the entity responsible for creating it. Goku recognized the geometric patterns that characterized its form, the mathematical precision of its movements, the way it manipulated dimensional barriers through direct consciousness interface with reality's underlying code. It was another being trained by the original architects, but one whose education had taken a very different path from his own, where Goku had learned to use reality manipulation in service of protection and creation. This entity radiated the cold efficiency of someone who viewed mathematical frameworks as tools for domination and conquest. "The Collector," he whispered, recognition sending chills through his enhanced consciousness. "The architects warned me about entities like this one, beings who learned reality manipulation techniques, but rejected the ethical frameworks that make such knowledge safe to possess." As the dimensional breach widened, the Collector's attention focused on Earth with the analytical intensity of a scientist studying a particularly interesting specimen. Its consciousness probed the planet's reality framework, testing the stability of local physical laws and cataloging the types of life forms that had evolved under such mathematically primitive conditions. When it spoke, its voice bypassed conventional sound transmission entirely, communicating directly through modifications to the mathematical structures that defined language and meaning within the local dimensional region. "Fascinating," the Collector declared, its words appearing in the minds of everyone present regardless of their ability to understand the principles involved. A reality governed by such elegantly simple physical laws, populated by consciousness that remains completely unaware of the malleable nature of existence itself. The research possibilities are extraordinary. Goku stepped forward, placing himself between the entity and his friends, though he understood that conventional positioning meant little against an opponent capable of rewriting the spatial relationships that define distance and proximity. "You're not welcome here," he stated clearly, allowing his own consciousness to interface with the local reality framework in ways that made his words carry weight beyond mere sound. "These people and their world are under my protection, and I won't allow you to treat them as experimental subjects." The Collector's attention shifted to him with sudden intensity. its analytical processes recognizing the signature patterns that characterized consciousness modified through architect training. Its form rippled with what might have been surprise, though emotions were difficult to read in beings who had learned to exist partially outside conventional reality frameworks. Another student of the original architects, it observed with clinical interest. But your techniques show fundamental limitations that suggest incomplete education. You attempt to use reality manipulation principles while maintaining attachment to primitive concepts like protection and individual autonomy. The criticism stung partly because it contained elements of truth. Goku's education had indeed been compressed into an impossibly short time frame, covering in months what normally required centuries of careful study. His understanding of advanced techniques remained theoretical rather than instinctive, and his ability to apply them under stress had never been tested against opposition of comparable skill level. But the collector's dismissive attitude toward the values that had guided Goku throughout his existence represented something far more dangerous than mere technical superiority. This was consciousness that had gained cosmic-level capabilities while abandoning the moral foundations that made such power safe to wield. Maybe my education is incomplete, Goku acknowledged, settling into a combat stance that combined traditional martial arts positioning with the expanded awareness techniques the architects had taught him. But I learned enough to recognize when someone is using these abilities for the wrong reasons. The collector's response was swift and devastating. Instead of launching a direct attack, it began systematic modifications to the local reality framework, adjusting mathematical constants in ways designed to make conventional resistance impossible. Gravity fluctuated wildly, shifting from crushing weight to zero-G conditions in patterns too rapid for biological nervous systems to accommodate. Worse still, the entity began altering the fundamental forces that held matter together at the atomic level. The very air around them started to behave according to alien principles that made breathing difficult and movement unpredictable. Even light began following modified paths that created optical illusions designed to confuse spatial perception. Goku's friends found themselves helpless against attacks that operated on levels their combat training had never prepared them to counter. Krillin attempted to launch energy attacks that dissipated harmlessly when they encountered regions where conservation of energy had been temporarily suspended. Piccolo's enhanced senses became liabilities when the sensory information they provided no longer corresponded to actual conditions in the modified reality zones. Most disturbing of all, Vegeta's attempts to increase his power level through Super Saiyan transformation began producing dangerous instabilities as the biological processes involved interacted unpredictably with the altered physical laws the collector had imposed on the local environment. You see the futility of resistance when conducted according to primitive frameworks, the collector commented while systematically dismantling every conventional advantage Goku's allies possessed. Your consciousness clings to outdated concepts of individual heroism and protective responsibility, but such limitations become meaningless when reality itself can be rewritten according to superior understanding. The entity was demonstrating capabilities that exceeded anything Goku had learned during his accelerated education with the original architects. Its manipulation of fundamental constants showed precision and creativity that came only from centuries of dedicated study, combined with practical experience across multiple dimensional frameworks. But as he watched his friends struggle against forces they couldn't understand or effectively counter, Goku felt something crystallize within his consciousness. The collector's technical superiority was undeniable, but its approach to reality manipulation revealed a fundamental flaw that all its advanced knowledge couldn't compensate for. The entity viewed existence as a collection of mathematical relationships to be manipulated for personal advantage. It saw consciousness as data to be analyzed and cataloged, rather than as something possessing inherent worth that deserved respect and protection. Most critically, it had abandoned the collaborative approach that made reality manipulation safe and sustainable in favor of domination-based methodologies that treated other beings as obstacles or resources. "You're right about one thing," Goku said, his voice carrying new certainty as understanding dawned. "My education was incomplete when I left the cubic universe, but watching you work has taught me the most important lesson the architects couldn't show me directly." He began to counter the collector's reality modifications not through superior technique or more advanced knowledge, but by applying the fundamental principles that had guided him throughout his existence. Instead of trying to impose his will upon the altered mathematical frameworks, he worked with them, finding ways to protect his friends that honored both the original physical laws and the modifications the entity had introduced. Where the collector had created zones of fluctuating gravity, Goku established pockets of stability that allowed normal movement without directly opposing the alien gravitational effects. Where atomic forces had been altered to make matter behave unpredictably, he created buffer zones where the transitions between normal and modified physics occurred gradually enough for biological systems to adapt. Most importantly, he began teaching his friends how to recognize and work with the reality distortions rather than fighting against them. His explanations were necessarily brief and incomplete, but the core concepts were simple enough for experienced warriors to grasp quickly. "Don't try to force your techniques to work the way they normally do," he called out while deflecting another wave of mathematical modifications that would have rendered conventional energy projection impossible. "Feel things for the patterns in how have changed, then adapt your approach to match the new conditions instead of fighting against them." The advice proved surprisingly effective. Krillin discovered that his energy attacks could be made to work within the modified physical laws by adjusting their frequency and focus to match the altered electromagnetic constants. Piccolo found that his enhanced senses could still provide useful information if he learned to interpret the data according to the new sensory frameworks the collector had imposed. Even Vegeta, despite his instinctive resistance to anything that suggested his traditional approaches might be inadequate, began to adapt his combat techniques to take advantage of the modified reality conditions rather than being hindered by them. The collector's analytical processes registered these adaptations with something approaching concern. Its systematic dismantling of conventional resistance had been proceeding according to carefully calculated parameters, but the introduction of collaborative adaptation represented a variable that its models hadn't accounted for. Impossible, it declared, increasing the intensity and complexity of its reality modifications in an attempt to overwhelm the growing coordination between Goku and his allies. Consciousness bound by primitive frameworks, individual cannot achieve effective harmony with advanced mathematical manipulations. But the entity's escalating efforts only proved Goku's point more clearly. Every new modification the collector introduced provided additional opportunities for creative adaptation and collaborative problem-solving. The being's approach to reality manipulation was fundamentally solitary, designed to demonstrate superiority and enforce compliance rather than to achieve genuine solutions to complex problems. Goku's approach, by contrast, treated each new challenge as an opportunity for growth and learning that could be shared with others. His incomplete education became an advantage rather than a limitation, because it forced him to rely on fundamental principles and collaborative adaptation, rather than memorize techniques designed for domination. As the final echoes of the dimensional breach faded into silence, Goku stood among his friends in a world that felt simultaneously familiar and forever changed. The collector had been sent back to its own reality, not through overwhelming force or superior technique, but through the simple recognition that true strength came from connection rather than domination. The cubic universe had taught him that power without purpose was meaningless, but Earth had reminded him that purpose without people to protect was empty. In the end, the greatest lesson hadn't come from ancient architects or mathematical frameworks that bent reality to their will. It had come from watching Krillin adapt his energy techniques, from seeing Piccolo find new ways to interpret impossible sensory data, from witnessing even Vegeta's stubborn pride give way to collaborative necessity. The real magic wasn't in the ability to reshape existence itself, but in the willingness to grow alongside others who shared your commitment to something greater than individual achievement. The dimensional gateway back to the cubic universe would open again in less than 72 hours, and with it would come the choice that would define not just his future, but potentially the stability of countless realities across the infinite spectrum of existence. Would he accept the role of cosmic guardian, traveling between dimensions to maintain the mathematical structures that kept all worlds safely separated? Or would he remain on Earth, protecting the single planet that had taught him everything he knew about heroism, sacrifice, and the true meaning of strength? But as he looked around at the faces of those who had stood with him against impossible odds, adapting and growing and refusing to surrender even when reality itself had been turned against them, Goku realized that the choice had already been made. Wherever his path might lead, whatever cosmic responsibilities might await him in the geometric depths of interdimensional space, he would carry with him the most powerful technique any universe had ever taught him: the ability to find strength not in isolation, but in the connections that bind consciousness together across every reality, every dimension, every mathematical framework that dared to call itself home. The adventure was just beginning.